Welcome back to the Peach Teach English podcast. I'm Frankie Mesmer, your host, and today we're going to be talking about writing tips to help you improve your English writing skills. And so I have invited Suzanne Davis, who is a writing tutor. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself, Suzanne?
Hi. First, thank you, Frankie, for inviting me on. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Suzanne Davis, and I'm an academic writing tutor. I also help people prepare for college writing. I've been actually teaching, I'm afraid to say how many years, but it's over 20. So I've been teaching writing and English to speakers of other languages for a really long time.
My first question for you is, what are the common struggles that people have when it comes to English writing? And are those different for non-native English speakers?
Well, there are some differences for non-native English speakers. So the first one that I'm thinking of is writing organization, because a lot of times if you're a native English speaker, you're very familiar with this essay format, writing the introduction, what you include in the thesis statement, and all of those individual pieces. But a lot of times when I work with non-native English speakers and they're learning how to write for university or academic writing in English, they come from a country or a culture where there's academic writing, but it's just another format. It's another organization. So understanding some of those pieces can be a struggle. The idea of what a thesis statement is. And so that's writing what you're going to prove or show or explain about a topic. An example of like a really general thesis statement would be high schools should have later start times for students. And to make that a thesis statement, you would want to explain why. So I always tell people add the word because. So here it could be high school should have later start times because many students are sleep deprived and it's affecting how their brain develops and operates in learning.
And that's something that was one of the first things they taught me, I would say in high school, but once I got into university, it's something they really taught us. Like, you have to have strong thesis statements, and we're going to show you how you can build one. It's basically you're telling your reader what the whole essay or paper is going to be about, and having that strong organization makes that clear for them. Something I noticed, Suzanne, from a lot of my students, I would say definitely coming more from a Spanish speaking background. In Spanish, it's common to write with a lot of commas and kind of going on and on and on with details, while in English writing, we would probably call that a run-on sentence.
Okay.
So a lot of Spanish speakers write run-on sentences with many commas, not as many periods. I would even say one time I was reading this book in Spanish. I don't remember what it was, but the whole first page was one sentence. So this is more common in that language, but in English, it's not. Would you agree?
I would say that we definitely have more of a blend of the shorter sentences and with the longer sentences. I do notice that with commas. One easy trick is if you have a run-on sentence, and so that's one whole sentence, independent sentence with another independent sentence, and you only add a comma there. A lot of times, instead of the comma, you can just put a semicolon there. Or that's a good place to just end the sentence and start a new one.
What is a run-on sentence? Could you define that?
A run-on sentence is when you have multiple independent sentences put together all as one, and there's no word to connect them, or you're just using a comma to connect them, and it's not a strong enough way to combine the two sentences.
Exactly right. So when we have those two independent sentences, which means we have like a full idea with a subject and a verb and then another one. You can't just throw them together with no punctuation. And even just throwing in a comma isn't going to be the correct way to break that down either, right? You either need to put in a period, maybe a semicolon. I think that's a big struggle for people who are trying to improve their English writing, especially if you're doing it more for the academic level or professional. When you're writing text messages, probably not a big deal. But yeah, if you want to work in English or you want to go to a university, you really got to get that punctuation down. Do you notice any other struggles from people writing in English?
The funny thing about English is in our conversational English and just everyday communication, you can learn a thousand words, and that's going to take up 90% of knowing English. But then when it comes to reading something that's academic or writing something that's academic, there is a whole bunch of other words that you need to understand that's going to make it easier to read and easier to write. There's a really good list that a professor in New Zealand came up with. She did research looking at all of those academic articles and everything that people publish, and she found that there's 570 what they call word families. A word family is where you would have a root word like the word analyze, and then you would have words that have that same root word, but maybe a different ending or a different beginning. So analyze, it could be in the word family, analytical or analysis, analyzing. Starting to get familiar with words like that can really help you feel more confident with your writing and be more fluent in academic writing.
And so I agree using those word families. So we're talking about what is the verb form, the noun form, the adjective, the adverb form. Are there a variety of noun forms? Because it could be the idea, the person, maybe the thing. It depends on the word, of course. So really trying to understand all the different parts of speech that can be used with that word. It's actually one of the easiest ways to expand your vocabulary because you probably already know one version of that word and now you're just adding to it. And oftentimes in English, there are patterns like happiness, sadness. So you can start to learn them even faster because you already have these two parts of the word and you're just putting them together. And like you also said, the word maps. It's a great way to find synonyms and grow your vocabulary, which will enhance your academic writing very much. What other skills and strategies do you have to help students improve their writing skills?
To read other essays, to read other pieces of writing, and then to take notes on them. Do you see where there's a thesis statement? Underline that. Do you see where they're explaining a piece of evidence? Underline that. And then afterwards, write in either like a reading journal or maybe just even on the page that you're reading a few sentences about what you liked that the writer did, or what you think could be improved or what confused you. That can be really helpful.
Do you have another strategy to help them improve?
For the ones that really have a hard time with an outline, what I do is I give them questions that will make sense for the outline so that they're just writing whatever notes they have that respond to that question.
Another thing that I think is really important that students need to do to like move their writing to the next level is the sentences do need to be a little bit longer, as we would call them complex sentences. Do you have any tips for that?
Is a tool, and I forget the name of it, where you can put in your writing and it identifies where you have simple sentences and then complex sentences, and you can see kind of the variety and measure your writing. And that's really helpful because if you see, oh, these are all simple sentences, you can look, oh, can I combine them together?
I think what's key to writing those more complex sentences is knowing connectors, right? So when you are a more beginner or maybe lower intermediate level, you probably can use some words like and, because, but when we do get to the more advanced level, you're going to want to use more variety. You don't want to say because, but every two or three sentences. So it's nice to start using words like nonetheless, however, besides. Can you think of any more good connectors?
Um, you still, however, nevertheless, I like thus. Which is
Thus,
thus, yes, because that's a good one to say therefore. It,
additionally,
you have a list of them.
and that's really the tip here. Look up a good list of these connectors. I can also leave a resource to that here in the comments. Someone says, consequently,
Yes.
there's really a long list, and as you become more familiar with them and practice using them, and really practice using them, choose some kind of topic and get more experience using these more academic words. I would say they're definitely more academic, though. We're not using them a lot in everyday speech, but that is the difference between a lot of speaking and writing, is we are trying to sound more professional. Would you agree with that, Suzanne?
Oh, definitely. I would. A lot of times in speech, instead of saying something like additionally or in addition, I'm saying anyway,
Right.
which is not exactly what you want to say.
Not
Um,
in a college essay.
Not in a college essay.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever, those types of things. But Grammarly has a blog. So the company Grammarly that does the spell check and grammar check. If you go there, they have a blog and they have a post that you can search for, and it's all different characters.
But we have to be careful with the connectors because there's certain ways to punctuate them when they start a sentence, when they go in the middle of the sentence, and depends what that connector is. So really studying those punctuation rules are important. Do you have any tips for the punctuation rules of these words?
Get to be friends with that semicolon. So if you're starting with one of those connector words, maybe in the beginning, then usually all you need is a comma. But a lot of times when you've got something in the middle and you're connecting one sentence or one idea to another, you want to have that semicolon. So that's where you have that dot with the little comma symbol underneath, and then the word or the phrase, and then follow it at the end with a comma. You want to kind of close that in.
Exactly, right? So it'd be semicolon, however, comma, right? To be able to punctuate that correctly. And usually when you start the sentence with it, like consequently, you would just put a comma and then you can continue the rest of your idea. But be careful. It's not very common to start a sentence with and, but, because we often use these more academic connectors in those cases. Would you confirm that is correct, Suzanne?
Yes. I mean, I'm starting to see it more that people are starting things with because, but a lot of people, including me, are like, oh, no, don't do that. A lot of professors will say, oh, no, 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 don't start a sentence with the word because, even if it is grammatically correct. I just don't like and, but, and because.
Yes, it's just like the rules of English writing, at least academically. So it's good to become familiar with these different rules. So we've covered organization, writing more sentences. Someone's asking here, what about using dashes?
I love writing with dashes. In academic writing, you don't want to overuse dashes. So a lot of times you can use a different form of punctuation where you have a dash. I think it's okay if you use it maybe once or twice in an essay, but if you find you're using it a lot, you can get into trouble. One, because if you've ever checked ChatGPT or some of the AI things, you'll notice that they use that dash a lot in writing. A lot of professors will look at that and say, that's AI just because they see so many dashes.
The next one I would say we can look at in terms of skills and strategies is, I think, just a great way for students in general to start developing better writing skills is to challenge themselves to write about their opinions or analysis on a topic and look up research and statistics to support that idea and really think of examples to support your opinion.
What I recommend is what we would call focused free writing. And there's been a lot of research with this, particularly with non-native English speakers in reference to learning English and how it helps them with their writing skills. And so it is where you would have a topic or a prompt. And a lot of times it is something you might be debating. But instead of going and looking up the answers, you're just taking that topic and you're just writing about it without stopping. You do this for maybe 5-10 minutes a day. If you get stuck and you think, I have nothing else to say, just write. I don't know what to say and write about that until you finish. What you'll find is you start to become better at coming up with ideas and reasons to support something or describe a topic, and your writing becomes more fluent just because you're doing it almost every day.
Suzanne, that made me think of something. It is brainstorming. Yeah.
Yes, we use it a lot for brainstorming. For brainstorming, one of the things is you'll take a topic and you free write about it. And then you look back on your free write and you say, oh, I like that idea. And you do what they call looping. And you take out that idea and you rewrite about that to get deeper into things. So it's very similar to brainstorming. Some people say it's brainstorming for people who find it easier to, instead of listing, just write.
And Suzanne, do you think it's better to brainstorm before you make like an outline or the opposite, or what's your advice on that?
I like to start with brainstorming or any kind of pre-writing. So maybe that would be doing what we call a web or a mind map. So you might have your topic, but you don't know, gee, what am I going to do with this topic? How am I going to narrow it down? Or what am I going to say about that? And you can just go to a place where you feel comfortable and focused and just write down that topic, put a circle around it, and everything that comes into your mind related to that. You just draw a line and another circle. And then if another idea comes off of that idea, you draw another line and another circle.
That makes sense because you're seeing like the bigger picture, all of your ideas, and then you can kind of cross out the ones you're like, maybe that's not the best for this situation. And then really choose what are your strongest arguments or points for your essay, and then you can organize with something much stronger. We're going to talk about next, guys, like what kind of activities or games you can do or play to improve your writing skills. Because obviously, to become a better writer, you need to write more often. So, what's one of your first activities or games, Suzanne?
So the first one is just look at a picture, write a story about a picture, or write a description of that picture like a postcard. Another one that I like is would you rather? And so you come up with something kind of crazy like, would you rather live in a castle under the sea or in a space colony on another planet, and why? Think of everything that comes in your head. Another one I like to play with is called the action of a sentence. And you kind of write wacky sentences, 3 parts to it. The first part, you write a list of 10 nouns. And then the second part, after you have your 10 nouns, is to think of an occupation like teacher, English teacher, or Spanish teacher. And then think of 15 verbs related to that occupation. So sometimes that takes a little bit longer. And then after you have your list of nouns and your list of verbs, write sentences combining those in different ways. So one of your nouns is mouse and one of your verbs is
Swim.
reading, or yeah, you would be writing a sentence about a mouse that's reading something. It's really a good way to get your sentences to have more action to them, to be what we call active sentences. It's easy to do. And I like to, if you have somebody with you, like just share them out loud.
Yeah, it's
There's
probably funny.
another one I like is called Writing Off the Page. This one is where you take a poetry book, or even you could just do any book, and you open it up randomly and you look at what's on the top of the page and you write that down and then write whatever is in your mind that comes after that. So it could wind up being a poem, a song, or you're just writing a story using that sentence.
Do you have any other games or activities?
I remember. So
Mhm.
this is where I take 5 minutes and I start with the words I remember and I write a memory I remember, memory I remember, memory. And then after 5 minutes, I look at that list and I just pick one and I start writing about that for however long I want to set the timer for.
This is another tip, right? Really think about your senses. Answering those, right? Who, what, where, when, why, how questions to try to develop more ideas and a more complete picture in your writing. Yes. I took a creative writing class at university and I really loved that. We had to write something every week and share it. Getting the feedback, you have to be very humble, but it really helps you become a better writer. Another thing that I really like to use is morning pages, right?
I know. I loved your video on that. You
Oh,
do
thank you. Yeah, you guys can watch that video. But yeah, Morning Pages comes from the book, what's it called? The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And basically, this book is made for people who are writers, and it's to get their ideas flowing in the morning because unfortunately, we're not inspired every day, but we still have to write. Yes. So the idea is you write 3 pages in the morning of stream of consciousness writing. So you don't really think about what you're going to put on the page, just what comes in your head, you put it there on the page. If you're not advanced in English writing, it's okay to start with just 1 page. And I really recommend making this a daily habit. And as a result, you'll start to have stronger ideas in English. You'll probably improve your spelling as well. And I really recommend writing it. I think we get really dependent on spell check, and this can affect us when we have to write a paper in real life and we don't actually know how to spell the words. I think even because of spell check, I'm forgetting how to spell some words. So we have to be careful with that. Have you had that
Mhm.
experience, Suzanne?
Oh, yes. I'll know I'm spelling something wrong, and it's always in front of somebody else. Like, I was in a meeting yesterday, and I had to spell a word, and I knew I was spelling it wrong because I was used to spell check showing me how to fix it. Oh, it was so embarrassing.
Yeah, you start to second guess yourself a little bit there. So, of course, they are great tools to like proofread and everything, but try to do some writing without that just to really test your level and your skills. The last game I want to recommend that you can do is just pick like 5 random words. It could be something like turtle, sing, microphone, chocolate, and flip flop, and then write a story. See what your brain can come up with. And usually these are pretty funny.
That is a good one. I really like that.
I know we shared so many great strategies, tips, games, activities that you can use to practice your English writing. Suzanne, would you like to share about your writing services?
Sure. I do academic writing coaching. So a lot of times what I do is I guide people step by step through doing the types of essays and projects and things that they're doing for classes. I do that one on one. I also help people who are planning on going to college or planning on going to graduate school write the types of things they need to write for their application. So those are things like personal statements, or maybe essays about what they're going to study, things like that.
Yes, and Suzanne has worked with a lot of non-native speakers as well, and so especially if you're someone wanting to move or study abroad and you need to develop your writing skills for university or for work, she will be a great help for you, and I'll be sure to include all her contact information in the description. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.